Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Golf Lovers United podcast. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Pro Golf Critic, and we're obviously here with a special guest. My other co-host Ben, unfortunately, a lot of you guys know that he's away for a little bit. He had a death in the family, so I'm kind of taking over his. He's usually kind of the host the host of this, and not really something that I love doing. I don't love hosting, but I'm trying to get a little bit better at it. But no, I'm obviously here with Bob Ball. Thank you for joining me, Bob.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. We've obviously had you on previously, and I've told people, one of the great things about the last couple of years is sort of everything going on in the pro golf world has led me to just to meet a lot of really cool and interesting people and people that I can consider friends now. And Bob, obviously you're one of those primary people. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, I love being here. It's great.
Yeah, good stuff. So the two of us, we've definitely over the last year plus, we've definitely stirred up a little bit of a hornet's nest here and there with just various analysis that we've done when it comes to everything going on with the PGA Tour and LIV and everything around, the potential merger that obviously got announced a little bit over a year ago that still hasn't been consummated for a variety of reasons that we will dive into. And I think, honestly, you're one of the people that's probably even more tied into this stuff than I am. We've obviously had a lot of regular conversations and sort of comparing notes over the past, year and a half. And I think it's been a really interesting, it's been an interesting process. But you actually had a chance to sit down and talk to a former member of the PGA Tour Board a little while ago, and you post about it. And it got a lot of attention, obviously. So do you want to kind of talk about a little bit? I've got a couple things from your post that I want to ask you about, but you just want to lead
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it really happened by chance, frankly. And I spotted the former board member, really. And, I knew who he was. And so I just went up and introduced myself, said, "Hey, my name is Bob." And I said, I actually know who you are. I know you were on the PGA Tour board. And I said, I found it really fascinating, to watch this process unfold. And he kind of smiled. And, we were just in a very friendly environment. And, it was very casual, if you will. And so I finally just said to him, I said, "Hey, I've been all in on LIV golf from the very beginning. I thought it was a great idea. Went out to the first event in Portland, and I'm like, what was your guys' deal? why did you?"
It's a great question.
Right.
Really,
I'm like, Why did you react like you did? And, but, they're in a friendly environment. So it wasn't like he was defensive or
it wasn't standoffish or
anything like that. It's more like guy to guy talk, if you will, honestly. And he said, "Well, look," he's like, the PGA Tour, the value essentially of the PGA Tour of the enterprise are the players, and they're a competition, and they were taking our players and the value of our enterprise. And I kind of got a skeptical look on my face, like, what? When he said they're ours, like our property.
Aren't they independent contractors?
Right.
That was part of the deal.
And he saw me get kind of a skeptical look, like, what? On my face. And he said, "Well, I know, they're players." And then I said, "Well, yeah, I talked about, I thought they're independent contractors, and I thought, they could go play, European tour or whatever they want, and they can go to tournaments if they choose or not to go to tournaments. I know that some of them have minimums or whatever they do." And so, it was really fascinating for me because it started with that. And then, and honestly, what I didn't write about is a lot of what I said. And he asked me what I thought. But I thought for the post, it was more important to write about things, points as we went along.
For sure.
He asked me, why I was interested in LIV or why I liked LIV initially. And obviously I've written a lot about it and talked about it a lot. So it was very easy for me to talk in very succinct points. I said, well, one, the average tour age fan is growing. I like new and innovative things. I thought the game was getting stale. I liked the idea of teams. That was something new. I thought there was a lot of potential around teams. And, it was interesting because as I would say things, I would elicit responses from him, or he would tell me kind of, what he thought about these different things. And so that was really fascinating. And that's kind of how we got into it. And we went into a whole range of topics, and it was, very friendly, very, very easygoing conversation. And it was, again, really interesting for me.
Yeah, I think those conversations are always the best ones because people aren't on the defensive.
Yeah.
Because look, there's been a lot of drama in pro golf over the last couple of years. I will be the first one to admit that. I had no idea that I was kind of going to be thrust into the middle of this.
Yeah.
As much as people think that I'm sort of some sort of paid influencer, that's not what this is. It never has been, and it's just a concept that I've been interested in. You were talking about, I think teams in golf is really where the sort of any sort of additional potential that we can unlock in professional golf is going to be through teams and sort of increasing interest and bringing more people into golf. That's been my block from the beginning, even before LIV was even a thing. So
I think one of the best golf broadcasts I've seen this year was, the playoff of the teams in LIV Golf.
Especially in Adelaide. Yeah, that was
No, you had these two countries, and you had teams that you had there was chanting like it was a big soccer match going on, and I was glued to the TV, watching this playoff, and you could see the individual winner was it Brent?
Brendan. Brendan.
He
shout out to him.
And that kind of got drowned out in the team playoff, which was fascinating. And I don't know if you ever saw the video of when I think it was maybe Cam Smith went into some place, maybe it was a casino even after, he just got cheered and roared. People watched that there, and I was glued to it. And, I can't remember who it was. I'm not like a golf techno nut. I don't remember every little person or player.
Right.
I'm a huge fan, but and I can't remember who it was that hit out of the trap and missed, or when they hit and missed.
That's right. It's what I'm here for. It was
right.
This thing.
I was like, I love this. I love this golf. So it was great.
No, it was great. It was definitely it was really compelling, and I think that gives a lot of people sort of a little bit of a inside baseball, or in this case inside golf, into what the future of this could look like. And then we're just coming off of the Olympic Games, where you could potentially have something like this in the Olympics that would just even elevate professional golf even further. So and I've already kind of gone off on the Olympics. I'm not going to get into too much today, but one of the important things that I think you touched on in your post was basically just the sustainability of kind of what's been going on at the PGA Tour, and I think it's been a concern from a lot of people, and just the current path, it just did not look like it was sustainable, even prior to SSG getting involved in sort of investing in PGA Tour enterprises. And it seems like it's very important for them to even get more investment. But that's one of the things I thought was important to highlight in the post, because the former board member, one of the things he said is look, under the way it currently sits, it's really clear. He said that, and to be fair, we also talked about LIV and sustainability, and we had a discussion that I felt like at the end of that discussion, it was sort of recognized by both of us that they're a whole different situation.
and the fundamental reasons behind their capital investment have a lot more to do. They're much more long term. It's a franchise model. It's also for people back home and their youth back in Saudi Arabia, and a lot of other reasons with much bigger plans about how they want to make it a destination. They've chosen golf as and soccer in some degree to be sports that are, part of their grand future plan. Why that's different, but he just said it. He came out and said, it's like, look, even with investment that SSG has put into the PGA Tour, without some form of an agreement, even a coexistence agreement, he doesn't see it being currently sustainable because of, he mentioned that viewership's been down. He told me that TV contracts that have been signed were, in a sense, antiquated because they locked in a particular viewing format, and you have all these sponsorships and all of these things that they've committed themselves to, but people are starting to watch golf in different ways, through social media and apps and things like that aren't relevant to the TV model. And he said that, all of those things are problems that need to be overcome, and that the amount that those contracts are worth are based on TV viewership. And that was interesting because I told them that, look, I understood that OWGR points were a key to, how many players are in it. Right. But something that new, and it was a semantic that he said to me, which it's also based on the viewership. So he said, and I, I haven't verified this or anything, and, right. Again, it's, the two guys talking, but he said that those contracts were based on viewership as well. Yeah. So I found that really interesting, and it makes a lot of sense because even with the investment, unless they change product or unless they figure out how to organically get more people watching, that that the model, even with the investment, was unsustainable.
Yeah, and I've certainly heard a lot of the same stuff. You and I have some common sources of information, and
sure.
one of the sources that actually several of the sources that I I've talked to fairly recently said that this is something that's come under a lot of scrutiny, the TV contract, and it sounds like this is kind of going on behind the scenes, that there's some negotiations to potentially restructure that deal and sort of lessen the economic impact of the deal. I think that it's $700 million, and I've heard like trying to reduce it to like closer to 400 million.
400, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like when you hear that, it's like, oh yeah, this is like a real thing. And that's not even getting into the fact that there's been, even though they've tried to deny it, like during COVID, there was allegedly there was a huge loan that they took out against the TV contract. So
interesting. Yeah, I've heard that. I haven't ever verified it. I don't know if I have a way to verify it.
Neither have I, but like there's like Tiger Woods was on record in a press conference talking about it like pretty much in detail, and then the PGA Tour came out the next day. I was like, oh no, Tiger misspoke, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Tiger did misspeak. I'm pretty sure that he probably knows
what's going on,
like better than the average person. So I think that he probably knows. So when you hear about all these other things going on, like I mean it's definitely, I've called it a little bit of a death spiral because like you have these renegotiated contracts, you've got with the TV, then you have sponsors kind of getting involved, in like a lot of sponsors obviously dropping out, like Wells Fargo is one that's dropped out, and I've heard potentially there might be 3 or 4 other really big PGA Tour sponsors that might be potentially dropping out. So it's definitely not sustainable, and I think that it's something they need to continue to look at. And I think that it, as we've both suspected, like the PGA Tour needs this deal more than ever.
I think they do. I mean, and to me, a deal isn't, people have used the word merger.
Right.
And I don't know that I even use that word, myself anymore at all. I think it's like a structured coexistence because, and again, I go back to what I've always said. My initial kind of look at the lay of the land of this thing was that it makes the PGA Tour has got a great brand name in the United States. Yep. It's a great position to start from, as they innovate. It's a dominant force really in the United States, but they have not done. This is another thing that the board member told me. He goes, look, there's no doubt the PGA Tour, essentially failed, growing the game overseas. Yeah, we had little bits and pieces, but the reality is that LIV Golf is good for that. And I think I've always likened it to NASCAR in the U.S. and Formula One internationally.
Mm-hmm.
You have some F1 events in the U.S., but primarily, most of it's based overseas.
Yep.
And, I still think that holds true. And I think that if they can just figure out this, and by the way, we talked about this, we had a very back and forth, wide ranging discussion about schedules. And, I said, we talked about that. We talked about how many events, and he's thinking, 4 or 5 LIV events in the U.S. I mentioned the idea. I said, really, if there's a bunch of elevated events that the PGA Tour can't afford, my view has always been, and I told him this view, which is that you could take some of those elevated events and make them the LIV events where they figure out how to get some PGA Tour players involved in those events, whether they do some match play events or come up with ways to get them to be able to compete for the individual trophies, or however they want to do it. If they just open up their minds and take, this is the way we've always done out of it, and think about what would be most interesting for the fans to see, I think that they could come up with something very easily. And he said one of the issues that he talked about that the players really only want to play 20 events a year. Mm-hmm. And so, even for the LIV players, if you have 14 or 15 LIV events and you have the majors, I still think that you're going to see players that would go to 2 or 3 PGA Tour events, or maybe whatever they want. Sure. And I think if you allowed some PGA Tour players to play at a LIV event, and they got some carrot for doing that, let's say they actually happened to play and they won a LIV event, maybe give them some way to play in other ones. There's so many possibilities. But again, people get closed-minded, and they don't think entrepreneurially, and they don't think that what's best. So I think that really the whole thing, it's always comes down to money, schedules, power, control, all these dumb things. Although I do think the money thing's important, but I just think that there really is a way. This comes down to scheduling, and there's a way to do it. And if they thought about it and they were cooperative about it and they felt like they were all going to benefit, then they would get to it. So, and by the way, he said that is where he thinks it's going to go, that there's some sort of cooperation, where like LIV will do its own thing. The PGA Tour does its own thing. They have some crossover. They have a way to play in each other's events. And then I see dumb comments. I mean, they're dumb to me. Like players on the PGA Tour say, well, it's a mindset that some haven't let go of. Well, if they want to come back to the PGA Tour, there's some players still talking about sanctions, or that is so ridiculous. I mean, the players are never going to pay for it. They might publicly come up, like somebody's going to pay for it other than the players.
Right.
And they might want to give the illusion that something was paid, but that's never going to happen. The players aren't going to.
No, like if they want to, like one of the things that I've heard is, now that we have this sort of for-profit enterprise, and PGA Tour players can have equity in it, like LIV players will never have equity in that. And I'm like, okay, like I mean, there's no LIV player that's like, oh man, I really missed the boat. Like, I mean, do people really think Phil Mickelson is gonna be like, oh man, I totally missed the boat on this? Like, of course not. Like he made, like, all these guys made a conscious decision. They're fine with whatever the PGA Tour decides to do. Like, they have no problem with that. Like, yes, I've talked to probably, over a dozen people at this point, players that have said, yes, I would 100% play in some PGA Tour events.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I were some of these guys, I would be like, screw the PGA Tour. Like, the way they treated me, like, I'm never going back. But a lot of them do have loyalty to, these tournaments, these like individual things that like meant a lot to them, whether it be sort of earlier in their career when they were getting started, or tournaments that they've won. So to me, it's like so clear, like what the path needs to be. And I think this
Yeah.
sort of closed-mindedness has been probably one of the biggest hurdles that they've had to clear, and it's not a hurdle that they've cleared just yet. So
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah. It's interesting because I think if they got just some independent, non-biased decision making,
right?
somebody that would just say, no, you know what, that's, you're living in the past here. You're not thinking about here. It's just not that difficult to solve if they think
Yes.
about it. And I also think that the reality of life is that it gives a way to grow golf around the world, because there are some players, if they had money available to them, similar to what the PGA Tour used to historically give. The reason we saw international players coming to the PGA Tour more than staying on DP World Tour or wherever they were, because of the money,
Yeah, it
right?
was money. That was it.
Better money, it's more competitive, but it really comes down to the money.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, there would be some superstar players that would want to be more international all the time. There are some that would want to be in the United States, and frankly, even some players from international places that may prefer to be, on the PGA Tour for whatever reasons.
Right.
And there may be some people that are on the PGA Tour that were good who may prefer to be international and to go to different places like they want.
Yeah.
And that would all
100%.
naturally sort itself out.
Yes.
And then let them cross over a little bit, and problem solved. And
yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, people, this is exactly why I've told people for the last year, like, this is why Jon Rahm decided to make the decision that he made.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the money's a big part of it, but like, you're getting that money to potentially help rebuild golf in your home country. Like, and that's part of the reason, because these guys are so passionate about golf in their home. Jon Rahm and Sergio are so passionate about Spanish golf. Like,
they are.
A lot of these other guys, like, Shane Lowry and Rory McIlroy, are super passionate about golf in their home countries of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Like, that's the thing that's always in the back of my mind about some of these really great international players. Tommy Fleetwood's another one. Like I've always thought that was sort of the end game for a lot of these guys, is that, yeah, they came to the U.S. for the money, to play for more money and all that. Except if they were given the choice of like getting more money and building golf in their home country or staying in the U.S., like, most of them are going to choose building golf in their home country and making more money and being like the reason why golf in their home country is completely remade.
Yeah. And I think, Jon Rahm, to me, I don't know him personally or anything like that, but he always seemed to have a sensibility of common sense about him. He wasn't out trashing LIV right away. Obviously he ended up going there, but he's talked in a very reserved and very unbiased manner, really, towards the whole thing. I think he's somebody that cares about the traditions of the PGA Tour and some of the tournaments he played in. And I think that what's interesting is, people have sort of put on him when he said, I miss going to the Amex because he won it, or some other tournament, that somehow he regrets his decision going to
Waste Management's another one.
Yeah. What he's actually conveying is that, yes, he made his decision, but it's kind of sad, because if you are common sense, like, and you think about it, I think what he's displaying is the sadness that common sense is not prevailing right now. And he's able to go play a couple of those events, if he wants to later. That is really the heart of what he's conveying. And I think if
100%.
people aren't being biased, they see that.
Yeah. And that's what's really frustrating me about the golf media, because every time a player states how they actually feel, and like their words get twisted about,
totally,
they regret their decision, they wish they were back, and it's like, that's not the case, and it like drives me crazy, which is why every time I see it, I've got to call it out, because it's just like, this has to stop.
Because what they're really doing is say, no, I'm good with my decision, but it's too bad we can't do what would make a lot of sense, which is playing a few of these events, and it would be better for everybody at the end of the day. There's another thing that when I posted, a lot of people were like, you're, everything you said is agreeable to LIV, or you're to LIV biased and all this other stuff. And, actually there's something in there that I posted that is really not very favorable to LIV, which was the concept of one of the things that I've naturally said, I mean, you could look at it as favorable or not, but I'm surprised more people didn't catch it, is the idea that, look, it gets harder to win on the PGA Tour as you get, especially over 35, I'd say, but it's not the easiest. And there's this purgatory for players between sort of the age of 35 and 50.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense that if you have earned and built up superstar status like Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth and, with wins and status, and somebody like Ricky Fowler, who's a real personality, for those guys, as they get older, it's going to get harder and harder. I think they've earned through that superstar status, a place like LIV to go where, they can even grow broader international fame. And it makes a lot of sense because they can still win on the PGA Tour, obviously. Yeah. But it just gets harder. And it doesn't mean that LIV is a less than tour.
No.
And I think,
it's less of a grind. That's
it's less of a grind. And I think it makes a lot of sense for some of those superstar players. It's not as hard on their bodies. They're not having to play as many events. Mm-hmm. And, for that reason, it makes sense. And so, I think that a lot of people wouldn't see that as a very pro-LIV argument.
Right.
But, saying, oh, well, you're essentially saying the has-beens are there. And I'm like, no, that's actually not. All these guys could still win.
Yeah. They're all great.
But it makes a lot more sense because I would say and I've always told people, well, first of all, golf is a very random game. It almost drives me crazy when I see people write about, look, we have one-time wonders that win majors, right?
No.
Golf is a very random sport in essence. And it turns out the best players ever were good enough that over that random, they have their best happen more often than the other people, and the other players, really. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. But you can have the difference between the lowest player on tour on their best day and somebody else on their best day is a lot smaller than people, I think, realize.
For sure.
I've always believed that. And so the idea that it's easy to win on LIV, I talked to this about the board member, and they all know that LIV's a tough place.
I mean, come on,
they all know that it's a tough place to win on as well. You got to be on your A game, and
anything in professional golf is a very anything at the top level where you have all these great players. It doesn't really matter how many you have. I mean. Because let's be honest, a lot of these really big field events that have 150 plus players, not all of the 150 players can actually win. So it's usually a smaller percentage of that. Except it doesn't make it any less difficult. It's a very very difficult, even with the PGA Tour losing all this talent that they did to even though they haven't lost it, they banned these guys. To be clear. But even with that, it's still very difficult to win, and you see it every week to week on the PGA Tour. It's still hard to win. It's not quite as hard as it used to be, just because you have some.
I would say that. I would say that the PGA Tour has gotten easier to win on with those other players going to LIV, frankly.
100%.
In some ways, because there's more proven. I mean, there's a lot of proven winners. I don't know the number, but
I mean, some of the greatest players ever, champions that are in their prime, champions that I mean, there's just so many. I've talked to so many players. It is extremely difficult to win on LIV, and it's raised the games a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and we talked about that as well. Actually, we talked about that whole concept because that's one of the things I said. Hey, when it first came out, I thought, this is kind of a natural fit. If you think about it,
for sure.
Yeah, we talked.
For sure. That's why the whole model, I've been preaching this from the beginning of LIV, if you have earned a certain standing in the game, you've earned this guaranteed payday that LIV offers.
Yes.
That the PGA Tour can't offer. So it's if you are that class of player that wants to be compensated in that way, now you have an option to potentially cash in on that when you didn't have that before.
And that brings up another thing that I did post about, which he said one of the problems with the current discussions are that there are players that are like, hey, well, we don't know if it's fair that some players get compensated, because that's great for them. And, as I said in the post, one of the things he said is one of the first things he said in our conversation, look, this has been good for the LIV players, but it's also been good for the PGA Tour players because
for the PGA Tour
they're all making more money because of it. There's the higher minimum now, the $500,000 they get fronted or whatever. And this has benefited everybody across the board. And, we talked about it, but he said one of the stumbling blocks is there are a large number of players that are feeling that, hey, is it fair that I don't get guaranteed as much guaranteed money as other players are getting guaranteed? And I thought that was interesting because, you hear about the whole meritocracy argument and, all that stuff. And I've always told people when you get professional athletes who are getting paid, I don't care if they're all vicious competitors at that level. They want to win.
You don't get to that level without.
They want to cut you off at the knees. They want to be the winner.
Yep.
And the idea that if they get paid, that's like, look, Tiger got paid enormous amounts of money, even if it was endorsement deals or not. He wasn't worried about making money. That doesn't mean that Tiger still was not a competitor. He wanted to
exactly.
win. Yeah. And all of them, in any other sport where they're making big money, the real competitors, the real cream of the crop, they're winners. And
that's why that whole guaranteed money argument has just been a crock of BS from the beginning. Because most of the great star players of all time have gotten some sort of guaranteed money somehow. Yeah. Now it's just structured a little bit differently, and the whole reason why people are negative about it is because the PGA Tour, like they've admitted now, they lost a ton of talent, even though, again, a lot of it was self-inflicted. It really was. And I think the more people you talk to at the PGA Tour, they all realize that it was self-inflicted. There were a lot of mistakes made. And I think that the focus now needs to be on the future and sort of where we go from here. Obviously, the last 2-3 years there's been a lot of drama.
Yeah. I asked him about Monahan, by the way, and I'm like, that guy. I'm like, what? How is he even still there? Whatever. And I got the sense by his body language, I think he's friends with him. I think the board member, is like, hey, kind of saw him as a, I think he senses he's somebody he gets along with, or still, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that that was interesting. But I said, what? I said I told him what. So the whole blood money narrative. And he acknowledged. He said, he goes, yeah. He goes one. He said this at the end, but he goes, look, I'm pretty convinced based on the discussions I had that Monahan and some of the other folks wish they had it. He used the exact words, I wish they had to do over. They wish they had to do over. Do that whole thing again. I'm like, really?
You think? It's pretty obvious. Yeah, pretty obvious.
Yeah, and he said that a CEO, and he told me the name of the corporation CEO, but I'm not going to mention it just out of privacy.
Sure.
But he told me, the CEO called me and said, what the hell are they thinking going on this? It's like, because, PIF is essentially everywhere. They've been vetted by CFIUS and everybody else. And if you understand how it works, their money is as good or bad as anybody else's, out there. And so,
because I've posted the names of 15 to 20 companies that do very, very big deals with the in Saudi Arabia. So this is not a surprise. And we all knew that was going to be something that sort of came back to bite the tour. And that was one of the things when it happened, I was just so surprised because it didn't make a lot of sense. Looking a few years down the road, I was like, this is not the way to go. And everybody that I've talked to kind of says the same. So
and by the way, for me personally, I don't think it's a bad thing to scrutinize investment in any, U.S. entities, although LIV's not even a U.S. entity, by the way. That's another thing. It's not even U.S. not even a U.S. company. But, I think, for people, that are giving their sponsorship dollars or anybody else, I think it's fair question. But, in the case of PIF being investment, they're very good accredited investors all over the investment world in a myriad of different business. And, it thought to me, if you think about it, a big investor in Live Nation, for example, is PIF. They're a huge investor and they have a huge influence on them.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Live Nation is partnered with Fenway Sports Group,
Yeah, right.
which, the SSG principles
Yeah, it's
are
mostly for
so,
Fenway Sports Group. Yeah.
the SSG, John Henry or whatever, they're already, partnering with a major PIF backed entity, because what they're doing, they're building those performance venues next to, if you go, next to the ballparks, the
Mm-hmm.
Red Sox ballpark, you have this beautiful, performance venue, and it's a big
Yep.
deal. So,
Uh-huh.
this whole
Yeah.
thing, it's just like, it made
Yeah.
it, and we talked about that as well. And,
Yeah.
I
It's all a it's all a very complicated web, and
yeah,
I think the thing that people need to realize is the fact that, obviously, and you mentioned it at the beginning, is that it's very, very important for PIF, Saudi Arabia's country, to sort of remake entertainment in their home country, which is part of the reason why they're investing in some of these other
yeah,
companies that are involved in entertainment. And golf is certainly one of those things. And like when you start looking around the landscape at like entertainment and golf, it's like, oh yeah, there's these other entities out there that they could potentially invest in
yeah,
that would make a ton of sense for their their
yeah.
vision. So
Yeah. And I actually did a lot of research, and I don't know if you've actually ever kind of got on, and I may be mispronouncing how they call it, but it's Gnome.
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, they have a plan in the future. They have a plan to develop golf resorts on their coast, and they've already
Yeah.
started that with
Yeah,
housing,
Royal Greens, yeah,
health,
that's one.
and they want to bring golf and have it be a sport as part of a major tourism. That's a huge part of their future plan, and bringing people, to Saudi Arabia, as well
Yeah.
as, like we talked about, it's great for, they're trying to give their youth, something to look
Yeah.
for, soccer and golf. And so where they just have so many other internal reasons for that long-term investment that make a lot of sense,
Oh, 1,000%.
what their goals are. So
Yeah, they're following, and this is something that I mentioned 2 years ago. They're following the whole template that UAE did with the city of Dubai. Like
yeah,
Dubai,
that,
30 years ago is really
yeah, that's
what
it.
Saudi is trying to get to. So, and
Yeah,
this isn't a secret. Like this is something, like, if you understand like affairs in the Middle East, like
yeah,
it's part of the thing that like they're very, very open about. So, and I think that's like it's something that I realize there's a lot of closed mindedness here in the United States to it.
yeah,
Except I think that when you realize the direction this is all going in, it makes more sense to be a tailwind to it rather than a headwind,
yeah.
because the headwinds have already been sort of blown through at this point, like they really have. So,
Yeah, and,
yeah,
if you just look at, I just looked at it as like, look, if somebody has been a bad actor, if you will, if you want to use that term, bad actor, in different, occasions. I mean, look, we've gone to war with countries and people that we're very close allies with.
sure.
The way in which I think you see positive change, if you look at history, is to help those that are wanting to make change to become better and better and better.
Yep.
I mean, we've seen that, in our own country. We've gone through our own struggles, and if you forget that, and I remember building a building one time. I built one, and people moved into it, and then when I built another one next to it, people that were in the building that I previously built were upset that their views were getting changed by the new building,
Right.
not realizing that they, in fact, occupied a building that did the same thing to someone else.
That's
It's
ironic.
like everybody's always like, hey, they want to forget, how
Yeah.
they may have gone through or been a part of something, and
Yeah.
become, sort of the
Yeah.
high ground on the issue,
It's
without recognizing that maybe part of their duty is to
Yes.
continue to help others along the way. So
It's always why it's so important for everybody to take a couple steps back and like really analyze the landscape of everything going on. Like
yeah,
instead of staying in a little bubble and sort of just that's your purview, just like take a little bit of time to step back, analyze the entire landscape,
Yeah.
look at everything holistically, and
Yeah.
that's what I've done from the beginning of this, and like
Yeah.
everything else
Yeah.
makes sense and falls into place. So anyway, we've talked a lot about everything going on with the past and sort of present at this point.
Yeah.
I want to get you out of here on this, just in terms of talking about the future, and we've sort of talked about a little bit where we
Yeah.
sort of see things going to, except with this sort of coming together over the next 4, 5, 6 months after the PGA Tour season's over. Where do you think this sort of nets out? Do you think there is going to be, like, the PGA Tour is going to allow this investment into PGA Tour Enterprises from PIF? Do you think that's going to fall apart? What do you think things are going to look like here?
Look, I think at the end of the day, it's going to happen. I don't know when, because honestly, that's what makes the most business sense in
Yes.
time. I mean, I just go, I remember a long time ago said, look, here's where I think it ends up. It's either going to be the easy way or the hard way. I think we're along the hard way in time, maybe. I mean, it's not been too hard. Everybody at the temperature has been down, for quite a while, which is good, a little bit on, the vitriol and stuff like that. But I think that eventually it will, end up, there's got to be some sort. And by the way, the former board member said that was a big point of what he said to me, which was, look, it's got to happen. Yeah. That's why he said, like, it's unsustainable for the PGA Tour under the current model, unless, they throw a Hail Mary pass and get, something happens. We've got to do this. So we figure out a way. Everybody uses, the term getting the best players playing together more often. I see the majors, but I also think other creative ways to do that, using both LIV and the PGA Tour. So yes. I do. I think it gets there eventually, because that's what makes the most business sense. Yep. And I think it all comes down to who is going to get what money for that, and who what their piece of the pie is when that happens. And that's always what this comes down to. And to some degree, I think SSG, how they drive this, because if they're looking at this and they think that their money's going to be burned through, like, when does that happen? Do they wait till it gets critical again? If so, it's going to happen later, or do they see the handwriting on the wall, or what they really feel? But I think that whenever you get the bankers involved, you tend to get more action.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that and more sensibility. I think that they're going to drive a lot of that. And I don't know what their sentiment towards it. It seems to me that if they had a negative sentiment towards the Saudis, I think they might have, this is only based on things I read, so I don't really know what's going through their heads, but why, to the extent that they felt like, oh, this is a U.S. sport and institution being invaded by the Saudis, which is complete nonsense, because golf's been around the whole world forever, and it's only because
invented here.
You are poached from everybody else. Is it?
Americans think that we invented professional golf. And golf, but
it's nonsense. And so I actually think it's going to come a lot down to what SSG. Yeah. And I think they're going to be a major force, and they're going to get antsy at some point with their investment. I don't think they want to lose that investment. I think that they looked at the PGA Tour and saw some assets there, the different
players
that they own. Like that's a valuable tournament.
Yeah,
which, by the way, brings up another point. People forget a lot of the value lies in the value of individual tournaments. The waste management is worth a fortune. The players is worth a fortune. I don't know how many hundreds of millions, maybe 100 or 200 million or something. They could. I don't know.
I heard the players was worth even more. I think the valuation is closer to $1 billion. So yes, that's my point. Well, as LIV has gone out, people say, oh, they're not getting a return on investment. Well, wait a minute. Actually, you start looking at the way these tournaments like Adelaide and Hong Kong and Singapore, the JCB, sponsoring, and I mean, that's like Caterpillar in the U.S. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they're putting their teeth behind this,
JCB's investing a lot of money in
they
that.
want to build an event. That is a value creation happening in front of our eyes that people, it's not just the teams that grow value, but it's these events that grow value. So
yeah,
I think that SSG is going to see that, and they're going to want to continue to grow that value and not lose value in some of the events.
Yeah. Yeah, and my hope has always been they've kind of been the adults in the room.
Yeah.
When they started to get invested in the PGA Tour, like I feel like that mentality is going to win out over the course of time because there's so many successful business people that are part of SSG that the players eventually are going to fall in line. It's obviously taken a little longer than I even thought to sort of get this thing across the finish line, but I think that there's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes that are going to be revealed in time for sure.
Yeah.
Like
I think I know what some of those are, but
like I could put the conspiracy, I could put the tinfoil hat on now and sort of give my take on some of the other stuff that is going on that I feel like. I'm not going to get into it now because I don't want this to be a 2-hour podcast. However, we will do another one, maybe at some other point to sort of dive into as details come out.
I don't know. I'd be curious to see what the folks at Redbird, not that they're not as big, as some of the other investors, but they've done some smart investing in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what's going through their mind and there and what they feel should be the right path. I'd be really curious to see what that's about. I don't know, by the way, that it seems the PGA Tour is trying to manufacture in a non-organic way into the good golfs of the world and the YouTubers. I think that the event, I don't know that setting up events with them, I'm not sure where that goes, like how organic that stuff's going to get or how many viewers it will draw. Maybe it does actually, because those entities have viewerships, but
they do. Yeah. Built in. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I'll be curious to see where that all goes, but
the YouTube thing, like it's been pretty funny how that has something, it's not really something that has been fully capitalized on just yet. I mean, outside of Bryson, who obviously saw this, a couple of years ago. And here he is making.
By the way, I took
President Trump.
I took a snapshot month and a half, 2 months ago of some users' social media accounts at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to wait till Bryson won. He just did the thing with Trump that I think's got 9 or 10 million views now.
It's got over 10 million now.
Yeah. And but I'm curious to see. I decided to take the snapshot and then see. I wanted to look at what I did is I took the top 12, 13 players on, based on the points.
Mm-hmm.
And that's changed since then, but I looked at where they stood in social media.
Yeah. And
I'm about to do a post. I've been waiting to do the recount. But what's interesting, if you took, like Tiger wasn't there, Rory was still on there. Essentially, the LIV players, if you take the top 12 or 13 and the point standing at that time, if you take Rory out of it, because Rory has so many followers. If you take Rory alone out of it, which honestly makes him more valuable to LIV if you think about it. But if you took Rory out of it, LIV and their social media impact has been better if you look at the top 12 players on each one. But the PGA Tour, in all fairness, wins because of Rory. Yeah. But if you take him out of it, and then, Tiger isn't one of the top 12, and Tiger obviously has far.
Yeah, but he's not really a current.
Yeah,
player,
but he's not really active, if you will. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. It's
it's fascinating to see where it all goes, but I do think they're going to come to something. They're going to have to. I mean, in some form or fashion, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, for sure. Like I feel the same way. I think the sort of balance of U.S. events, international events, always made the most amount of sense. And then having those, 5 U.S. events being crossover events where you can have some of these other legacy PGA Tour events as sort of double as live events, like
Yeah.
where you have this crossover, and though it just elevates those events too. So instead of
I,
just having the 4 majors, you can double it really.
yeah, and if you think about the Ryder Cup, how successful it is,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you could get, whether it's LIV versus PGA in, a match play event, or
Yes.
you start getting more country, you see some natural LIV teams, the Spanish teams, you get
Mm-hmm.
all these different possibilities for competitions. I think would make golf much more exciting for a lot of reasons, and would draw
1,000%.
fans from these countries.
Yes,
Um,
100%. Like that's like we were saying, the potential in golf is really teams and building teams and having
yeah,
these competitions. And
yeah,
then you also have the Olympics every 4 years. Like you could really
yeah,
start to like see if you really take a few steps back and look at the big picture, like you could do some really exciting and cool stuff. Like it's been the thing that's gotten me most excited about LIV from the beginning was
yeah.
like I've obviously been excited about LIV and the teams and all that, except this overall sort of reshaping and remolding of
Yeah.
professional golf.
And by
Like
the way,
that's the most
when you talk about Olympics, I will go on one Olympics rant. I want people
sure.
I want people to remember who was the main catalyst that got golf to be an Olympic sport again. Do you know the person? And I think I have this right. His name is Ty Vota.
Oh,
Ty was the commissioner of the
I forgot
LPGA.
about him. Yeah, yeah.
He goes over the PGA Tour, and he was really, in my understanding, was back because I remember this back when it was going on. He was the driving force behind it, and the
Yep.
whole way in which they institutionalized OWGR points into who gets picked for what. It's so
Yeah.
dumb. In my view, if you're the United States, you should be able to pick who you're. I'm with John Rahm. I'm with John
Yeah.
Rahm. Spain should be able to pick their players. The idea that the OWGR and these governing bodies pick who's representing their country is ridiculous. But I believe it goes back to, again, you had a guy who ends up working at the PGA Tour. It was the main, and he may have been at the tour. I can't remember the exact timing, but that's another way.
Yeah, I
in
think
which,
he was.
yeah,
He's
that's another way
retired
in
since
which
then.
they cannibalized.
Yeah.
They cannibalized the sport around the world to control who's there, and that
They had
needs.
they had their tentacles in like every
Yeah,
part, trying to push everything to the U.S. and the PGA Tour. And
yeah,
that was
and the
one part of it.
OWGR. It's just,
Yeah,
to me,
for
it's
sure.
ridiculous. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think you'd get really much natural, bigger competitions, bigger numbers, bigger viewerships if you let these organic competitions happen between natural
1,000%.
rivalries and so forth in
Yeah,
countries.
yeah, because I've gotten so much feedback from like Australians who I've gotten to know really well that like Cam Smith wasn't in the Olympics, or
Yeah,
like South Africans complaining about
yeah,
how
yeah,
two of their best players, Louis Oosthuizen
yeah,
and
yeah,
Dean
yeah,
Burmester, weren't in the Olympics. Like they probably would have had the best chance of winning. So
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah, so there's a lot of things that definitely need to be remade for sure. Like there's so much possibility and potential here that like
yeah,
I just want everybody to again take a couple steps back, forget about all the drama that's happened, and just like get excited about the future of golf, because that's really what's been driving me from the
yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
And there's just so much potential in golf. And
Yeah, the board member used the word egos several times. He just said like,
those executives have a lot of egos. They really
he
do.
said
Like
there's a lot of egos, that have been getting in the way of this. And by the way, he referenced more on that side the PGA Tour. He wasn't sitting there saying that Yasser had a big ego and that was the problem. I think Yasser wants is a cool, calm, collected head in the room that wants to see golf grow. And
yes, I think he has one of the like when there's a pecking order of like people helping to run professional golf. He probably has the least ego out of like, any of them, especially when you compare to some of these executives on the PGA Tour board, running companies and all this other stuff. So I mean, it's and the American personality is just a little bit. It's a little different too. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and end it there. I knew this was like I was thinking, oh, this is going to be 30 minutes, and we've talked for almost an hour. So, and we can very easily go for another
so much
hour
more
if we
to
really
go
wanted
more.
to.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, for sure. But no, thank you again, Bob. This has been awesome as always, and thank you again for all of your support too. Like you've become a friend, you've become a confidant, and I always enjoy our conversations. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing this and seeing
absolutely.
where things go for sure.
Hopefully Ben's doing okay. By the way, I want to, I feel bad that about his dad, and I sent him a message, and I hope he's doing okay. So
yeah, he's hanging in there. Like I think he got so much. He was really overwhelmed. He told me he was really overwhelmed by the amount of support that he's gotten. Like
yeah,
professional golfers have reached out to him offering their
yeah,
condolences, and I think that made him feel really good. And it just goes to show you, like, we're really trying to build like a community of like-minded
yeah.
people that love
Well,
love golf. Like
I
that's
have not
the
been
biggest
posting
thing.
much. I've had people reach out and they're like, "Gosh, are you okay? You haven't been posting as much." And the reality is, it's like, "Hey, I'm sending people a message back. It's member guest season.
That's right.
I'm trying to work,
Yeah.
but I've had So I fly out tomorrow. Member guest number 4 weeks in a row." with
Wow.
you get out, you have your practice round on
Yeah.
on a Wednesday, then the member guests are all Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and you get
That's
home
right.
Sunday. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I've been
I forgot about that. Yeah.
I've been in golfing season,
That's
and
all.
I'm hurt. I snapped an ankle in my first one, and so it's been
Yeah.
really interesting, but it's been
Yeah.
fun. So.
Good. Yeah. I've been saying how I haven't played nearly as much golf this year as I've wanted to, needed to, for various reasons, work, travel, all that stuff. I'm going to be starting a new routine. I'm going to be focused more on my health and wellness
Oh,
for
that's
next
good.
year,
Yeah.
for tournaments next year. It's going to be partially sponsored by a company that I will reveal
Oh,
at a later date. It's a company that I think you'll know very well,
yeah,
Bob.
that'd be
So
great. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna kind of start a little bit of a health journey here, because look, I'm getting a little older, and like if I'm gonna play a lot of golf and practice, like I need to get a little
I
bit
hear
more
you.
serious about it.
Yeah. I've lost 20 pounds,
Oh wow.
probably in the last 6 months. I feel better. I think my low handicap maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, was like a 4 handicap. I've been in an 11
Oh
because
wow.
I haven't been able to
Yeah,
play.
it's the practice and play. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's so
I've been
important.
able to
Yeah.
practice, and I've been thinking to myself, yeah, I mean, I get out, I just cold play,
Hmm.
and I just don't have the time. I haven't had the time. So it's interesting because that's one of my things I want to dedicate more time. I started doing the fitness part and whatever, other
Hmm.
than being injured with my
Yep.
ankle. The interesting thing about playing these member guest tournaments is, I'm getting better and better as I go through them.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh,
and,
nice.
and a lot of it doesn't count. So I'm really excited to see, if my handicap's going to get better now, because, if you're playing in a Pinehurst or a Chapman format or whatever, or your score doesn't count when you're doing a best ball on
All
a
right.
match play, you can't,
Hmm.
you don't post a score per se, but I feel
Yep.
like I'm getting better. So
Good.
I,
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to do that. Just get healthier, and especially as we get older. And
Yeah. I know all too well, unfortunately, but the 20 pounds you've lost, I probably picked it up. So I've got to get serious about it, but I've got a plan. And
yeah,
next tournament season, I'm going to be a brand new person. So
that's
thank
exciting.
you again. Yeah. So thank you again, Bob. A lot more to come. I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
hop back on and sort of talk about this more. Bring Ben back into the fold. And in the meantime, thank you everybody for listening. And this is Pro Golf Critic signing out.